My name is Adam Broderick and I joined Sittingbourne Rugby Club when I was 11 years old. I grew up here, making lifelong friends and learning how to play with an odd-shaped ball. Sittingbourne is a grassroots rugby club in the southeast of England that was founded in 1976. The club fields 3 seniors teams and has one of the largest youth sections in the area. With a new head coach trying to integrate the under-17s into the seniors and a team fighting for promotion into the Kent 1 League, 2020 was always going to be an exciting year for Sittingbourne. But the coronavirus pandemic turned an eventful season into an impossible one.
On the 29th of February 2020, Sittingbourne were playing a local derby against their old foe, Sheppey Rugby Club. Just 15 minutes down the road and a short bridge apart, the two sides share the kind of rivalry that only the closest of neighbours could ever experience. But little did Sittingbourne know, it would be their last game for 18 months.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
Like the rest of the world, Sittingbourne were left bewildered and lost when the UK locked down in March. With 2 games left in their season and the second team's potential promotion in the balance, the club was left rudderless. Head physiotherapist Emma Elgar had to think outside the box to keep players engaged and physically fit while stuck at home. Creating a quarantine fitness group chat, she set weekly challenges and workouts for the teams, encouraging interaction and keeping players connected in a time of isolation.
It was a case of, right, let's just try and keep them fit, ready to come back in a couple of weeks. So I decided, if I could, was to get a bit of competition in there and get them training together from afar. Mentally, it was really important to keep people moving because it helps them so much with their mental well-being. We had a lot of people out of work, and without that purpose, I think people can get a little bit lost. So it was just a case to try and keep people on the straight and narrow, giving them a bit of a focus. It was so rewarding to see the progress that people had made, and the effort people were putting in just made it all a bit more worthwhile.
In June, England's governing body for rugby, the RFU, released their Return to Rugby roadmap. The guide defined 6 stages from A to F, which would slowly ease teams back into friendly matches. From June the 1st, England entered Stage B. Players could meet in groups of up to 6 for socially distanced exercise, provided they didn't share equipment.
The roadmap was really helpful, and essentially it was like the Bible. We just followed it really religiously to make sure that everything went to plan. And when we were allowed to start doing fitness training, no rugby balls, again, everyone was just so desperate to see people. The first couple of sessions, it was literally like herding cats because everyone was so excited to see each other. I'm trying to get people to stand in boxes. But again, they were very good to me because they knew that if we didn't follow the rules, then we couldn't do it.
These 6-person fitness sessions continued for 2 months until the government began easing lockdown restrictions. The RFU announced the move to Stage C of their roadmap in August, allowing players to finally engage in activity that vaguely resembled rugby. However, due to worries over COVID transmission and players' fitness, only touch rugby is allowed. The full version of the game normally involves a fair amount of controlled violence. Touch or non-contact rugby means players are effectively tackled when touched by the opposition. Eventually, in September, the RFU moved to Stage D, allowing full contact rugby for 20 minutes per training session. Players were finally able to gently assault each other under the excuse of rugby training, making it even more important to ensure that their bodies were ready.
When rugby started coming back, I'm not going to lie, it made me a bit anxious. I think there will be a stage we go through where we pick up a lot more injury, just because you can't prepare the body for rugby without rugby. Some of the injuries you see, the only other place you'll see that is in a car crash. And that's a lot for the body to take on. It's the equivalent of having an entire team out for an operation for a year.
Sittingbourne's new head coach, Gary Miller, slowly reintroduced tackling to training. On the 31st of October, Sittingbourne experienced full contact rugby on a Saturday for the first time in 8 months. The weekend training session marked the beginning of a return to normality.
I was absolutely buzzing after the session. I was so happy with the way the session had planned out. That Saturday was probably the best session since I've taken over. Was by far, everybody was on board with it. There was some buzz about the group, and it just had that normal Saturday feel about it. There was a bubble of noise around again, and lads were smiling, and it's, yeah, we're back to playing rugby, and then that comes on, and then the mood sort of drops.
This sudden drop in the players' mood was an emergency announcement from the government.
From Thursday until the start of December, you must stay at home.
With a second national lockdown, the players' fragile newborn hope was swiftly crushed by COVID, leaving the club dejected.
I'm extremely frustrated, but it's sort of out of my hands, out of the club's hands, and just down to the local area with the figures. So yeah, it's frustrating because I want to be going back now, but fingers crossed when we can go back, that there might still be that little bit of a buzz around of what we achieved.
The hammer blows kept falling. COVID cases spiked, and Kent was classified as the first Tier 4 area in the government's otherwise 3-tier plan to tackle the virus. Christmas rolled past with restricted socialising, yet in the new year, the COVID figures kept climbing.
That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home.
Throughout the pandemic, Sittingbourne's Director of Rugby, Dave Pratt, bore a heavy burden making tough decisions to protect the community.
The third lockdown for us was very different. From a management point of view, we're trying to make sure that firstly, the volunteers are safe and the players are safe, which sometimes that can be quite a hard sell because actually what we're doing is stopping someone from something they love. Do you really want that weight sitting on your shoulders that we went back too early and someone became really ill? I'd rather be hated and be the reason for not going back than everyone goes back properly at the beginning of next season and we're all healthy and fighting fit.
As a local grassroots club, Sittingbourne still had to find ways to keep the lights on. Government grants and assistance from the RFU helped massively, but clubs were still missing their member subscriptions and sponsorships.
We also have to make sure that we're financially safe as well. With the first lockdown and the second lockdown, we actually put all our membership subscriptions off. We don't want to put burden on anyone. At the end of January, the Kent 2 and the Kent 4 leagues were meant to start up again. At that point, that gives us some credibility to turn around to people and say, look, is there a chance of some money? We need to keep the club afloat. And membership's a really tricky subject.
And with cases higher than ever, the RFU roadmap became even more essential.
Now this third lockdown has come in effect, we're back down to stage A again, which is one-on-one training. And that allows us to get into a situation where players are fit enough to cope with it. So even though we're grassroots, players are still taking contact. And to suddenly pick up a player and say, right, tomorrow you're going to go and tackle someone, that's too much. So we have to slowly bring everything in.
With another month without training, players' fitness can begin to slip without individual effort.
It's the motivation is the problem. So end of first lockdown, we thought that something would happen around November. We might get matches back. So that's where that big kind of, yeah, we're going to do this as a team, and everyone's geeing each other up and it goes on. Then you get the second lockdown and it's like, oh, here we go again. That's the thing, when you change the boundaries, it's very difficult to keep people interested.
3 months later, the government's vaccination scheme intensified and COVID cases slowly dipped. On the 29th of March, restrictions on amateur sports were eased. The very next day, players swarmed to Sittingbourne after nearly 5 months of waiting. The first thing that I asked Gary Miller that Tuesday night was, how are you feeling right now?
Extremely happy. I think it was more than I ever imagined. The first night back to have 52 players come back, and players that we haven't seen for 2 years, 3 years. It was nice to get everybody back with a change of mindset towards the players and explain to the players what I expected going forward now in this long pre-season. The change in attitude and the willing to become better players has taken a massive step up.
Talk fluttered around the club's WhatsApp group of potentially squeezing in some friendly games before summer claimed the ground. But the coaching team are determined to put all their efforts into preparing for next season.
We're trying to change the way the club are playing rugby. And I didn't really want to go into friendly games before the end of May and the end of the window and start showing teams how we're going to play. Because everybody have their own vision of how Sittingbourne play rugby. I want to go into our season in September and dominate the league.
The RFU's updated roadmap put English rugby into stage D1, allowing limited full contact training to resume. Now, at 13 months since their last game, the players' bodies may have become unused to the proper tackling techniques and body position to safely play rugby.
I think it has affected them, especially around the contact side of the game, because we are allowed to do some minimal contact. That's definitely affected players, and I think they won't tell us that they're affected by it. I think they want to use the excuse that the ground's a little too hard. And I understand why they won't say, because it's not, you don't want to stand in front of your peers and go, I don't want to do tackling because I'm not ready for it.
Gary's next steps for Sittingbourne are less about the rugby and more about the people.
The team bonding, I think that's one of the big things for us. Behind the scenes, we're looking at doing club days, we're looking at doing training on the Saturdays to start getting the players back in that mindset. We're looking at team bonding exercises through the summer that we can do. Doing something socially will change the group dramatically, so I'm hoping that's what's going to happen anyway.
It's not all good news for Sittingbourne. The RFU have adjusted the way juniors integrate into adult rugby. Usually, once a player is 17, they can play full contact rugby in a senior squad, provided they're signed off at a county level and have the approval of their club's safeguarding officer. Now, 17-year-olds can only play in the senior squads from next year. As the head coach for both the seniors and the under-17s, this rule change has massively impacted Gary and his youth side.
I understand why they've held the younger age groups back for the 6 months, but this group that I've been in charge of, they'd already played 2 seasons of 15 aside, and they were ready. And that's all their junior build-up of rugby is. You get to 17, and you can, as long as the paperwork's done correctly and the coaches think you're ready, they can play senior rugby. So then to turn around to those lads that are 17, and go, you can't play rugby now until January 2022 is a massive kick in them. For me, being their old under-17s coach, I was absolutely gutted for them initially. Some of these lads I've had since they were 6 years old. And to know them personally for that amount of time, I knew the effect that this would have on some of them. So yeah, it's been quite tough.
Another player frustrated with the decision is Noel Stockdale, who's coached this youth team with Gary for 10 years.
For me, absolutely makes no sense at all. Whether they're 18 or 17, there was always going to have a transition in rugby. If we hadn't had the pandemic, they would have been transitioned into rugby at 17 years old. We aren't going to just throw them out onto the pitch, but we do want to blood them into the sport, taking it on in a controlled manner. We don't want anybody to get injured. We want longevity. I mean, I'm 44 years old now, and I'm still playing it, and I absolutely love it, and I want to play for another 5-6 more years yet.
Stocky was happy to tell me what he thought the next step back to normal for the club should be.
Get not just the players out the point here, it's the people that come up to this club week in, week out, people who've been coming here for 20, 30 years. That's what we've got to get them back. And the reason they come here is seeing people play rugby and the community spirit that we have at the club. I love seeing all the people, it's great. And listening to the old stories, I've made so many memories here, predominantly with drinking, not through my rugby talent, but they're still memories.
But what do Sittingbourne's members think? I asked some of them what they love most about their club.
We're a very tight-knit family, really. Grassroots rugby at its best.
The camaraderie. So we made lifelong friends through playing rugby here. So all my best friends, my best man, godfather to my kids, all of them are all from rugby.
Good bunch of lads, friendly, welcoming, and I just like how intense it and learning straight away. Like, it's really enjoyable to just come in and just get stuck into rugby.
It's a nice little community, I suppose, with all these lot. Yeah, it's don't really matter who you are, you get along with them.
You know, rugby's about playing, of course it is, but it's also about the others. The third half, as they call it in Holland, you know, and we're very, very good at stuff like that.
The whole club is family friendly. Everyone gets along with everyone. It's just a brilliant club to play for.
It sort of brings the club ethos together, I think, with everyone having a laugh, having a drink after the game, after training sessions. It just brings back that family orientation.
Sittingbourne has always placed an emphasis on the social side of their community. Whether it's rowing, tug-of-war competitions or boat races, the club's extracurricular activities have always been just as important as the rugby. Fred Nash literally wrote the book on Sittingbourne Rugby Club and is a figure known to all around the clubhouse. A self-described legend, Fred chronicled the club's 40-year history since 1976 in his book Bourne To Play. He was the perfect man to ask why Sittingbourne is such a sociable club.
First of all, you have to understand, Sittingbourne grew from 77 and just before as a town that started to have a lot of incoming families. That brought a lot of mums and dads and kids in, and I think that inherent foundation has always remained. That community attitude is underlying in the club. It's never been lost. The community involvement, the mums, dads, kids, generally dominate the club. The club worries about the success of a third team as much as it does, or vets as much as it does a first team.
As one of Sittingbourne's veteran members, Fred thinks some members of the club were more affected by COVID than others.
The young players, I think, I came here last Sunday a fortnight ago, and I saw a lot of 6 to 11, 12, 13-year-olds running about so joyously. I think everybody's been affected. Many players who are desperate to play on a Saturday, having worked hard all week and enjoying their game. That wasn't there for them. But I think the young kids, mostly, because there's nothing worse for a 6, 7, 8-year-old to 14, 15, 16, having to be locked with your parents and not with your peers. When I watched them, and there was probably 120 top and bottom out there, they were all running around together, they were so fully involved, you could see the joy. So I think the youngest, most of all.
Someone who appreciates the importance of youth rugby is Hayden Thompson-Stringer. Growing up in Sittingbourne, he spent 6 years at the club before moving on to pursue a career as a professional rugby player.
I think I was roughly 10. I used to play football for Sittingbourne Lions, and I was pretty aggressive on the pitch, and the coach was actually the one who said, have you ever thought about playing rugby? And luckily I had a friend who lived down the road from me who said, we go to rugby on a Sunday down at the Grove, we'd love for you to come. I used to just love just turning up, playing bulldog down at the Grove with your mates. There was nothing better than that. After that I was hooked.
Hayden now lives in France, but will never forget where he came from.
Without Sittingbourne, without going every Sunday, without doing that, I would never be where I am today. And I never knew that I was going to be playing for Saracens, playing for Breathe in the top 14, and have opportunities like to play for England 20s and stuff like that until after 16. But before that, it was just about enjoying it and like making friends. I feel like that is like a real important time of your life to really enjoy it and make friends and make long-lasting friends that then helps you pursue whatever you want to do in life. I think it's very important.
Now, on a Sunday morning in May, I had a catch-up with Gary. With Sittingbourne's fixtures for next season announced, there finally seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's really nice. It's been a tough year, tough for me personally, coming into the role in lockdown, and finally coming out of it now, which is really good. So 3 months away, and we'll be back hopefully to full rugby.
Like the rest of the club, Gary has missed rugby dearly in the last year.
Right from the get-go, as soon as I was appointed, it was being appointed and not being able to get going. It was just the waiting, and it's the first time that I've actually really missed it. Where you normally have your summer break and you enjoy that break. I just wanted to get back and be back doing what I love.
The RFU has also adjusted their guidelines on integrating youth players into the adult squads.
When the lads turn 18 before January, they can now play. We've had that change, which is really good. and it'll be for the club to see that youth come through in January fully. It'll make a massive, massive difference.
As Fred Nash said, the family element in Sittingbourne is still very much present at the club. Gary is still staying involved with the youth players and preparing them for the day they join the senior teams.
I've already done a lot of work with our under 15/16s, and so I'll be in and around that group quite a lot in the next 18 months of their development, preparing them for senior rugby.
When I look back on the last year and a half, the one thing that I think I've learned is just how significant this rugby club is to me. I love this sport. Even just watching old match footage gets my adrenaline pumping. But Sittingbourne Rugby Club is about more than just a sport. This community is brought together under the umbrella of rugby, but it's made up of hundreds of friends and a mass of families. We've all got rugby in common, but the pandemic has taught us that we can still exist together without it. Sittingbourne has waited 18 months for its next game, but we've waited together as one club. Born to play we might be, but this year we were born to wait.